Happening tonight, a special meeting taking place in Ansonia as the current mayor is asking for an investigation into the misuse of city funds from the previous administration.
And he's looking for the same firm that's investigating former New Britain Mayor Aaron Stewart. Amanda Callahan is your reporter live outside of City Hall with what led up to this now. Amanda.
Well, Mark and Stephanie, tonight the Board of Aldermen will decide whether or not the mayor can hire an independent firm to investigate these allegations. Antonia's current mayor, Frank Tiska, says this was all revealed in a Freedom of Information request, and it found that there was potential misuse of city credit cards, city vehicles and fuel purchases, and possible use of City Hall for political activities during work hours. Now, all of these allegations are facing former six-term Mayor David Cassetti in his former administration. Yesterday, Cassetti told us in a statement that he welcomes an investigation and nothing out of the ordinary was done. The firm Tiska wants to use is the same firm that New Britain hired for its independent investigation into City Hall and former Mayor Aaron Stewart, who then dropped out of the race for governor after reports came out about her potential misuse of a city credit card. Board of Aldermen meeting is set to take place at 7 o'clock inside City Hall here behind me. We'll, of course, be in there and let you know whether or not that investigation is approved or denied by the Board of Aldermen. We'll bring you that update in Eyewitness News at 11. Your reporter live in Ansonia, Amanda Callahan, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.